Hi there. Okay, I'm back. So we were in the middle of chapter 47. The princess, said Botticelli. The princess, the princess. Everything seems to be about the princess these days. The king's men were down here searching for her, you know. They didn't find her. That goes without saying. But now a mouse has arrived and he's on a quest to save the princess? Yes, said Despereaux. He took a step to the left of Botticelli. How inspiring, said Botticelli. Said Botticelli. He lazily took a step to the right, blocking Despereaux's way. Why the hurry, little friend? Because, said Despereaux, I have to. Yes, you have to save the princess, exactly. But before you save her, you must find her, correct? Yes, said Despereaux. What if, said Botticelli, what if I told you that I know exactly where the princess is? What if I told you that I could take you right directly to her? Said Despereaux, his voice shook, his paw on the needle trembled. Why would you do that? Why would I do that? Why would I help you? Why? To be of service. To do my part for humanity, to aid in the saving of a princess. But you are a rat, supplied Botticelli. Yes, I'm a rat, and I see by your trembling that the greatly exaggerated rumors of our evil nature have reached your oversized ears. Yes, said Despereaux. Said Botticelli, swinging the locket back and forth, if you allow me to be of assistance, you will only be doing me a tremendous favor. Not only can I do a good deed for you and for the princess, but my actions will help you to dispel this terrible myth of evil that seems to surround rats everywhere. Will you let me assist you? Will you let me assist myself and my kind? Reader, was it a trick? Of course it was. Botticelli did not want to be of service. Far from it. You know what Botticelli wanted. He wanted others to suffer. Specifically, he wanted this mouse to suffer. How best to do that? Why, take him directly to what he wanted, the princess. Let him see what his heart desired, and then, only then, to be faced with what he loved, would Despereaux die. At the end of it all, how tasty the mouse would be, seasoned with hope and tears and flour and oil and thwarted love. My name, little friend, is Botticelli Rimorso, and you may trust me. You must trust me. Will you tell me your name? Despereaux Tilling. Despereaux Tilling, take your paw from your weapon. Come with me. Despereaux stared at him. Come, said Botticelli. Let go of your needle. Take a hold of my tail. I'll lead you to the princess, I promise. What, reader, in your experience, is the promise of a rat worth? That's right, 0, zip, nada, goose eggs. But I must ask you this question. What else was there for Despereaux to hold on to? You were right, again, nothing. And so the mouse reached out. He took a hold of the rat's tail. Chapter 48, on the tail of a rat. Have you ever had a hold of the tail of a rat? At best, it's an unpleasant sensation, scaly and cold, similar to holding onto a small, narrow snake. At worst, when you are dependent upon a rat for your survival, and when a part of you is certain that you are being led nowhere except to your death, it's a hideous sensation, indeed, to have nothing but a rat's tail to cling to. Nonetheless, Despereaux held on to Botticelli Rimorso, and the rat led him deeper and deeper into the dungeon. Despereaux's eyes had, by this point, adjusted quite well to the darkness, though it would have been better if they had not, for the things he saw made him shiver and shake. What did he see? He saw on the floor of the dungeon it was littered with tufts of fur, knots of thread, and the skeletons of mice. Everywhere there were tiny white bones glowing in the darkness. And he saw in the dungeon tunnels through which Botticelli led him the bones of human beings, too, grinning skulls and delicate finger bones, rising up out of the darkness and pointing towards some truth best left for the unspoken. Despereaux closed his eyes, but it didn't help. He saw that if his eyes were open wide, the bones, the tufts of hair, the knots of thread, the despair. Ha ha, exactly, Botticelli laughed as he negotiated the twists and turns. Oh, yes, exactly. If what was in front of Despereaux was too horrible to contemplate, what followed behind him was perhaps even worse. Rats, a happy, hungry, vengeful parade of rats, their noses up in the air, sniffing. Mouse, sang out one rat joyfully. Oh, yes, mouse, agreed another, but something else too. And you can see here, oh my goodness, look at this photograph of Botticelli and Rimorso, and Despereaux's holding on to his tail. Soup, called out another rat. Yes, soup, the others agreed. Blood, sang a rat. Blood, they all agreed. And then they sang, here, mousy, mousy, mousy. Here, little mousy. Botticelli called out to the other rats. Mine, he said. This little treasure is all mine, gentlemen and ladies. Please, I beg you, do not infringe upon my discovery. Mr. Remorso, said Despereaux. He turned and looked behind him and saw the rats, their red eyes and their smiling mouths. He closed his eyes again. He kept them closed. Mr. Remorso, he shouted. Yes, said Botticelli. Mr. Remorso, said Despereaux, and he was crying now. He couldn't help it. Please, the princess. Tears, shouted the rats. We smell tears. Mousie, we do. Please, shouted Despereaux. Little friend, said Botticelli, little Despereaux Tilling, I promised you, and I will keep that promise. The rat stopped. Look ahead of you, he said. What do you see? Despereaux opened his eyes. Light, he said. Exactly, said Botticelli. Light. Chapter 49. What do you want, Miguerisao? Again, reader, we must go backward before we can go forward. We must consider for a moment what had occurred with the rat and the serving girl and the princess down in the dungeon before Despereaux made his way to them. What happened was this. Roscuro led the pea and Mig deep into the dungeon to a hidden chamber, and there he directed Mig to put the princess in chains. Gore, said Mig, she's going to have a hard time learning her lessons if she's all chained up like. Do as I say, said Roscuro. Maybe, said Mig, before I lock her up, and her and me could switch outfits so we could start in already, and her being me and me being the princess. Oh, yes, said Roscuro, certainly a wonderful idea. Miss Miggery, princess, take off your crown and give it to the serving girl. Pea sighed and took off her crown and handed it to Mig, and Mig put it on, and it slid immediately right down over her small head and came to rest quite painfully on her poor abused ears. It's a biggish thing, she said, and painful like. Well, well, said Roscuro. How do I look? Mig asked, smiling at him. Ridiculous, he said, laughable. Mig stood blinking back tears. You mean I don't look like a princess? She said to the rat. I mean, said Roscuro, you will never look like a princess. No matter how big a crown you put on your tiny head, you look exactly like the fool you are, and always will be. Now make yourself useful and chain the princess up. Dress-up time is over now. Meg sniffed and wiped her tears, and then bent to look at the pile of chains and locks on the floor. And now, princess, he said, I'm afraid that time for your truth has arrived. I will now tell you what your future holds. As you consigned me to darkness, so I consign you too to a life spent in this dungeon. Meg looked up. Ain't she going upstairs to be a serving maid? No, said Roscuro. Ain't I going to be a princess too? Ain't I going to be a princess then? No, said Roscuro. But I want to be a princess. No one, said Roscuro, cares about what you want. As you know, reader, Miguerisao had heard this sentence expressed many times in her short life, but now in the dungeon it hit her full force. The rat was right. No one cared what she wanted. No one had ever cared. And perhaps worst of all, no one ever would care. I want, cried Mig. Shh, said the princess. Shut up, said the rat. I want, sobbed Mig. I want. What do you want, Mig? The princess said softly. Huh? Said Mig. What do you want, Miguerisao? The princess shouted. Don't ask her that, said Roscuro. Shut up. But it was too late. The words had been said. The question at last had been asked. The world stopped spinning, and all of creation held its breath, waiting to hear what Miguerisao wanted. I want, said Mig. Yes, shouted the pea. I want my ma, cried Mig, into the silent, waiting world. I want my ma. Oh, said the princess. She held out her hand to Mig. Mig took a hold of it. I want my mother too, said the princess softly, and she squeezed Mig's hand. Stop it, shouted Roscuro. Chain her up. Gore, said Mig. I ain't gonna do it. You can't make me. Here's a picture. She's saying, what do you want? Here's the beautiful Princess Pea. And there's Miguerisao with the crown. And there's Roscuro. You can't make me do it. I got the knife. She took the knife and held it up. If you have any sense at all, said Roscuro, and I heartily doubt that you do, you will not use that instrument on me. Without me, you will never find your way out of the dungeon. You will starve to death here, or worse. Gore, said Mig, then lead us out now, or I will chop you up into little rat bits. No, said Roscuro, the princess shall stay here in the darkness, and you, Mig, will stay with her. But I want to go upstairs, said Mig. I'm afraid that we are stuck here, Mig, shouted the princess, unless the rat has a change of heart and decides to lead us out. There will be no changes of heart, said Roscuro, none. Gore, said Mig. She lowered the knife. And so the rat and the princess and the serving girl sat together in the dungeon as, outside the castle, the sun rose and moved through the sky and sank to the earth again, and night fell. They sat together until the candle had burned out and another one had to be lit. They sat together in the dungeon. They sat, and reader, truthfully, they might be sitting there still if a mouse had not arrived. Chapter 50, in which the princess says his name. Princess, Despereaux shouted. Princess, I have come to save you. The Princess P heard her name. She looked up. Despereaux, she whispered. And then she shouted it. Despereaux! Reader, nothing is sweeter in this sad world than the sound of someone you love calling your name. Nothing. For Despereaux, the sound was worth everything. His lost tail, his trip to the dungeon and back out of it and back into it again. He ran toward the princess, but Roscuro, baring his teeth, blocked the mouse's way. The princess cried, Oh, no, Rat, please, don't hurt him. He's my friend. Meg said, Don't worry, princess. I will save this Macy. She took the kitchen knife. She aimed to cut off the rat's head, but she missed her mark. Whoopsie, said Miguerisao. Chapter 51, What is that smell? Oh, my goodness, and look at, there's a picture of the rat and Despereaux. Don't move, said Despereaux. I will kill you. Ow! Screamed Roscuro. He turned to look where his tail had been, and as he did, Despereaux drew his needle and placed the sharp tip of it right where the rat's heart should be. Don't move, said Despereaux. I will kill you. Ha, 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 Botticelli laughed from the sidelines. Exactly. He slapped his tail on the floor in approval. Absolutely delightful. A mouse is going to kill a rat. Oh, all of this is much better than I anticipated. I love it when mice come to the dungeon. Let me see, said the other rats, pushing and shoving. Stand back, Botticelli told them, still laughing. Let the mouse do his work. Despereaux held the trembling needle against Roscuro's heart. The mouse knew that as a knight it was his duty to protect the princess. But would killing the rat really make the darkness go away? Despereaux bowed his head ever so slightly, and as he did so, his whiskers brushed against the rat's nose. Roscuro sniffed. What is that smell? He asked. Mouse blood, shouted one rat. Blood and bones, shouted another. You're smelling tears, said Botticelli. Tears and thwarted love. Exactly, said Roscuro, and yet there's something else. He sniffed again, and the smell of soup crashed through his soul like a great wave, bringing with it the memory of light. The chandelier, the music, the laughter, everything, all the things that were not, would never, could never be available to him as a rat. Soup, moaned Roscuro. And as he began to cry, Boo-hoo, shouted Botticelli. Sss, hissed the other rats. Kill me, said Roscuro. He fell down before Despereaux. It will never work. All I ever wanted was some light. That's why I brought the princess here, really, just for some beauty, some light of my own. Please, shouted Botticelli, do kill him. He's a miserable excuse for a rat. No, Despereaux, said the princess, don't kill him. Despereaux lowered his needle. He turned and looked at the pea. Boo, shouted Botticelli, kill him, kill him. All this goodness is making me sick. I've lost my appetite. Gore, shouted Mig, waving her knife, I'll kill him. No, wait, said the princess. Roscuro, she said to the rat. What? He said. Tears were falling out of his eyes and creeping down his whiskers and dripping onto the dungeon floor. And then the princess took a deep breath and put a hand on her heart. I think, reader, that she was feeling the same thing that Despereaux had felt when he faced with his father, begging him for forgiveness. That is, P was aware suddenly of how fragile her heart was, how much darkness was inside it, fighting always with the light. She did not like the rat. She would never like the rat, but she knew what she must do to save her own heart. And so here are the words the princess spoke to her enemy. She said, Roscuro, would you like some soup? The rat sniffed. Don't torment me, he said. I promise you, said the princess, that if you lead us out of here, I will get the cook to make you some soup, and you can eat it in the banquet hall. Speaking of eating, shouted one of the rats, give us the mousey. Yeah, shouted another, hand over the mouse. Who would want him now, said Botticelli. The flavor of him will be ruined. All that forgiveness and goodness, blah, I for one am leaving. Soup in the banquet hall? Roscuro asked the princess. Yes, said the pea. Really? Truly, I promise. Gore, shouted Mig. Soup is illegal. But soup is good, said Despereaux. Yes, said the pea. Isn't it? The princess bent down before the mouse. You are my knight, she said to him, with a shining needle, and I am so glad that you found me. Let's go upstairs. Let's eat some soup. And reader, they did. Chapter 52, Happily Ever After, and this is the last chapter of our book. Sorry for the wait, Mrs. M. But the question you want answered, I know, is did they live happily ever after? Yes and no. What of Roscuro? Did he live happily ever after? Well, the Princess P gave him free access to the upstairs of the castle, and he was allowed to go back and forth from the darkness of the dungeon to the light upstairs. But alas, he never really belonged in either place. The sad fate, I'm afraid, of those whose hearts break and then mend in crooked ways. But the rat, in seeking forgiveness, did manage to shed some small light, some small happiness into another life. How? Roscuro Reader told the princess about the prisoner who had once owned a red tablecloth, and the princess saw to it that the prisoner was released. And Roscuro led the man out of the dungeon into his daughter, Migurisao. Mig, as you might have guessed, did not get to be a princess, but her father did atone for what he had done. He treated her like one for the rest of his days. And what of Despereaux? Did he live happily ever after? Well, he did not marry the princess, if that's what you mean by happily ever after. Even in a world as strange as this one, a mouse and a princess cannot marry. But reader, they can be friends. And they were. Together they had many adventures. Those adventures, however, are another story. And this story, I'm afraid, must now draw to a close. But before you leave, reader, imagine this. Imagine an adoring king and a glowing princess, a serving girl with a crown on her head, and a rat with a spoon on his, all gathered around a table in the banquet hall. In the middle of the table, there is a great kettle of soup. Sitting in the place of honor right next to the princess is a very small mouse with big ears, and peeking out from behind a dusty velvet curtain, looking in amazement at the scene before them, are 4 other mice. Mon Dieu, look, look, said Antoinette. He lives, and he seems such the happy mouse. Forgiven, whispers Lester. Cripes, said Furlow. Unbelievable. Just so, says the threadmaster Hovis, smiling. Just so. And reader, it is just so, isn't it? The end. And here is a picture of the king and Princess P and Despereaux. And here are Despereaux's family. That's the end of this book and the end of Camp Read a Lot. I will see you for Camp Read some more. Bye.